Hello and welcome everybody, innovators and entrepreneurs. This is Josh Wingate, your host of Stories from the Founders. Each week on our show, we delve into the gritty, thrilling roller coaster journey of building an early stage startup. And our podcast shines a spotlight on the tenacity of entrepreneurs who are out there in the trenches, wrestling with the ups and downs and bringing an idea to life. And we unpack their successes, but also their crucial moments of struggle and doubt that inevitably come with this territory. On Stories from the Founders, we believe that each startup story is a masterclass in resilience, innovation, and pushing the boundaries. Now, our mission is to offer you, the listeners, a blend of inspiration and hard-earned wisdom that you can take for your own ventures. And today, we have a special guest, Trevor Blake, CEO of Wedstimate, a founder who's faced the storm and celebrated the sunny days and continues to navigate the unpredictable seas of the startup warrior. Thank you for coming on, Trevor. How are you today?
Great. Thanks, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on. So we have a series of questions I think that our listeners would love to hear, and I'll just roll right into it. I'd love to hear from you. If you can share your story of how your startup came to be and what inspired you to take this path.
So a couple things. I've sort of always been an entrepreneur. I lemonade stand as a kid. When I was in college, I actually started a .com that was for portfolios, and we tanked because we didn't have any money. People use our same model though now, like Behance, Dribble, Carbon Made, like very similar idea. But what happened to me this time was I was just working in advertising, and it's very linked to the economy. So when the downturn happened in 2008, I was sort of out of a job. And then 2009, I went to another ad agency, Deutsch in LA, and then our client went out of business and I was out of a job. So I started my own company to sort of make sure that I wasn't out of a job every time the economy went bad. And that was DJing weddings. And so then as I DJed weddings, I just realized that there was this opportunity for there to be a company that helped wedding vendors reach more people at a lower cost than the big directories that are out there now.
Awesome. So yeah, you became an entrepreneur really in one of the most difficult periods to build a business. Is that right?
Yeah. That what is it? The financial crisis, 2008. Yeah. The agency that I worked for actually was all real estate. And so, I mean, they just got wiped out. I mean, they were a great agency, but they got wiped out, right after that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that's similar to what we're going through today. And I know that a lot of the founders that are listening to this can probably agree, it's very scary in the times that we're currently in. I guess since you've already been through one of these financial crises and building a startup, what would be some of the knowledge that you gained from that?
I would say that tenacity, for one thing, don't give up. You got to just sort of keep going. And then, I'm sure all entrepreneurs say this, but you got to look for that opportunity. So when you see the need for something in the market, and if you're able to fill it, then that's where you go for. Like find something that has a need and try to fill that need.
Yeah. So for the current venture that you're running, how many years has it been since you started this?
I mean, I filed the paperwork in 2021. But we didn't really get started till 2022.
Yeah. So for about 2 years, roughly, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, 2.5 at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, 2.5. That's right. Yeah. Congrats on, most startups in their first year. Honestly, I think the failure rate is it's over 50%. So even getting to year 2 or 2.5 is a pretty significant milestone. But maybe you could shine some light on this past couple of years, some of the more significant challenges you faced in your early stages, and of those challenges, how did you overcome those?
Yeah. The biggest challenge I think was finding a company to develop the app and the website that wasn't going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So one of the things that may be unique to me, but I think that our listeners will be able to find somebody who could help them with this, is that I am an art director slash graphic designer slash UX designer. So I was able to put my ideas on paper, and then I could take it to the developers and say, hey, this is what it should be. Or I mean, I use Sketch and I used Figma. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that some people know what those are. And I was able to have a real prototype, so I could go to the company and say, hey, this is what I wanted to do. And I was really disappointed because the first company I went to, I showed them what I wanted to do, and they were like, this is going to cost you like $90,000. And I was like, I don't have $90,000. What are you going to do? Yeah. So I shopped around. I did a bunch of research online. Luckily for me, I actually have a cousin who works for Salesforce who does some of this kind of stuff. So she was able to give me some direction on, what to look for. And I found a company that quoted me about $25,000 to do it, and I had that kind of money, so I was able to after going through numerous rounds with other companies, find them and say, hey, let's get this started.
Yeah. So you really had to go into some creative areas and actually find a solution to getting the developer you were looking for. Yeah. So, I mean, that brings up the concept of bootstrapping for a lot of startup founders who don't necessarily have the money to, pay for that developer up front, or, even know anyone who can actually go out and develop that app. Some of the more interesting strategies that you've tried, it sounds like you went to a friend and looked for, essentially price shopped. What would you say you've learned from that scenario? Did it work out well, or how is it today?
I mean, you know what is funny? I think that it is a little bit of both of those things. Number one, I think that it worked out well. I think the app looks great and it does what it's supposed to do. On this side of it, if I could go back, there's definitely other things that I would change. I would say that it's one of those moments where you had to take that leap and just go and do it. And then if there were things that you want to change, you'll have to go back and change them. You can't predict everything in the beginning. Right.
Yeah.
And you can't like hesitate. You can't say, I'm not going to do it until I know the answer, because then you'll never do it. So I'm glad I took the leap. There's a couple of things I would change, but overall, I think it worked out really, really well.
Yeah. I love that, taking the leap, because honestly, that's really the only way to actually learn is going out there and doing this, just taking action on it. And I always say this, fail hard and fail fast as much as you can, because the failures are the ones that give you the most wisdom in building a business. And of course, if you, go out there and you make a mistake, you can always pivot from that. And sounds like you weren't afraid of that failure. In this business, you can't, it's just like, you can't go out and take a test and expect to score 100% every single time. If you do miss one of those questions, it's okay.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that brings to mind, moments of success for me. Could you talk about a moment of success or a breakthrough in your journey that you're really proud of?
Absolutely. It's really easy for me to come up with one because it just happened, which was we won 2023 Wedding App of the Year from Lux Life magazine. So they just reached out to me one day. I wasn't expecting it at all. They reached out to me one day and just said, hey, we've been looking at your site. Can you answer these questions? We think that your app is a contender for Wedding App of the Year. And so I just filled out this questionnaire, and then they got back to me and they said, hey, we really like you and we're going to feature you. Here's, again, more questions I had to answer. And then they gave me a press release and they were kind of like, here you go. I will say this, they told me, I think this happened in like April. They were kind of like, we think you're going to be the winner. And then they were like, in May, we'll give you. And then it didn't happen until like either the end of May or like early June, where I figured, I finally got like the actual, okay, like, hey, you can tell people that this happened. So
yeah. It's really those small moments of success that honestly keep you going. I mean, I could share a story of my first company. It was back in 2012. Med Manager. It was just a binder. I would literally hit the pavement and drove around to every pharmacy in Atlanta. And the moment I walked up to one of the first pharmacists, and they said, hell yeah, I would love to buy one of those. That was after months and months of actually like calling people and getting no traction whatsoever. And as soon as I got that first little sale, that was all I needed to continue to go. So when you get one of these small wins, or big win in your case, it really makes all the difference as you continue to see your idea validated and appreciated through that. So congrats on that.
Well, I appreciate it. And I was just going to say the same thing. It's like that little bit of validation where you're like, I think I'm on the right path. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, you can write up the most extensive business plan and it all pretty much goes downhill from day one. And that's why you have to keep iterating
right.
and iterating as you go through. But yeah, that's awesome to hear. Yeah. Well, could you walk me through, some of the necessary skills in order to actually build a startup that you've learned over the last 2.5 years, or how did you even go about developing these skills? Who did you learn from, or where did you get your information from?
So yeah, different place. So first of all, I graduated from the VCU Brand Center for graduate school. It is a tough program, and I definitely look back on it, and like that sort of tenacity of just like being in there and doing that was really helpful. And then I did work in advertising for years, and one of the things I think is funny is I work for a bank now. I worked for First Republic. Now I work for JP Morgan Chase. So, that's just how it happened. But, people will say, oh, I had to work late the other night. I was here until, 6 or 7 o'clock. And like in advertising, we would work. I mean, there were times that you just didn't go home. You know what I mean? Like you'd be on a project and you'd get in at 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday and you wouldn't leave until, noon on Wednesday because you were just working that hard through. So founders in general, I think all the founders that I know are super hard workers and are just willing to get their hands dirty and just do it until it's done. I think that's an important trait.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I graduated with a degree in advertising, and art direction was my focus. So I do have some design skills. So I was able to put that together and actually lay something out that looked like I wanted it to look. I do think that sometimes founders can get caught up in that design because what they'll do is they'll have an idea and then they'll be like, well, let's bring it to market. And then it's like an afterthought. Oh, we need someone to design it. Yeah. And then it'll end up being expensive if you do it that way. So I was able to sort of cut out that middleman and understand that, design first and then build.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you are speaking a little bit on the concept of what are called founder blinders, where they essentially have tunnel vision and they want to get every little tiny detail perfected without ever even showing it to the first customer.
Right.
Which at the end of the day, customers tell you what your product should be. And rather than continuing to iterate and iterate and iterate before you even sell your first app or first product, it kind of goes back to the thing we were just talking about, where it's just like, get it out there. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. In the early days, there is no perfect app.
Right.
That does take time to develop in that. And that comes from the feedback from the customers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I definitely learned a lot from customers too. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an app, that it's wedding estimates. So we call it Wedstimate. And a lot of the people who use it are brides to be. I am not a bride to be. So like getting the female perspective is very good. And every time they tell me, hey, change these looks or do these things, I definitely take it to heart because I'm like, that's who I'm talking to.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that actually brings up a good point. I mean, you're not a bride to be, but you do understand the problem and how to solve it. That I think is actually maybe a barrier to a lot of founders, is that they think they maybe have to be a subject matter expert in the industry or the problem that they're trying to solve. I could say for me personally, that wasn't the case. I didn't have a medical background, but I helped build a med tech company. And for you, you have a lot of experience in the wedding area, not a bride to be, but you know how to help them and get what they are looking for. So that's awesome here. So, I mean, I want to talk about you're currently fundraising, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously raising funds is one of the more critical steps for any startup. And as far as how it's been for you so far, it's always very bumpy. I know that from experience as well. And I guess what I want to get from you is if you could share a little bit about your experience in the current funding route that you have, and any advice that you would give to new startup founders.
Yeah. The biggest piece of advice, and I definitely just didn't even I didn't believe it in the beginning, was just share your idea with as many people as possible. So like I do understand that there's some things that are proprietary and you don't want to like give up the goods. But the way that I got funding was that I was showing people I was telling people about the idea, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And I think it's going to be really good. And I was able, again, I have the background, so I was able to show them the prototype, and they were like, "Oh, this does look good. Let me introduce you to my friend who also can, help you find it." You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I definitely got a lot of no's, but I did get one yes that helped me really start. So it was from Market Street Solutions, or Market Street. I feel bad now. I'm not getting their name right. It's Market Street Capital, I want to say, and they gave me the first loan that was 0% interest, and it was a CDFI. And so they were like, stay in Oakland, hire some people from Oakland when this gets big, and here you go. We think you have a great idea. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had to go through they had to do a really critical background check and, credit check and all that. And, how much money do you make and business plan and all that kind of stuff. But it was genuinely just a friend of mine at the bank was like, that's a really good idea. I think I have someone who you should meet.
Yeah. Yeah. So do the no's get easier each time?
I mean, I feel like this. I'm always disappointed that I can't move the project forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not disappointed that they said no to me. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like I'm ready to move forward. I want to say I was never like, oh, they hate my idea. I was just like, oh, well, they just didn't want to fund it. I'll find someone else who does.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent perspective. You don't necessarily take it as that your idea sucks. It's really that they're just maybe not the right moment for the investor to go out there. And, that'll definitely keep you going if you get down on every single no that you get, because you're going to get them. I don't know anybody who first investor they approached and they got a check, maybe if they're like a Google executive or something like that. But yeah, it's going to happen. So, as you go through it, I mean, I could probably say that it doesn't necessarily get easier every single time you get a no, but what it does is, just like you said, it kind of drives you to figure out why they didn't say no and how you can improve and go out there the next time and actually close it. Because really that's what raising capital is. It's an iteration process on pitching your idea.
Right.
So just as it takes the effort to create the best product and hearing the feedback from the customers, what's also important is when you're trying to sell shares in your business is to do the same. You're refining it each time you go through the investment process. And the startups have to pivot their business models all the time. And that makes me think, as far as you starting 2.5 years ago, how much of a change has it been for your business? I mean, it doesn't even look the same of what you originally imagined. I guess, can you share an instance where you had to do a really, really hard pivot, and how did that affect your business?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of instances right there. The first really hard pivot was, my initial concept was that it was a mobile app, right? And people getting married or getting younger, but like Gen Z is getting married now. They're Gen Xers, the younger end of that. And so I was like, oh, well, everybody's on their phone. They're going to rather you do that than the internet.
Yeah.
So that being said, the people that I talked to who saw it on the phone were like, this app is great. We love it. And then I went to some vendors who were just older people, like people who own wineries. Typically, they're not super young. You know what I mean? They own a winery in Napa. They're not, 20-year-olds. And so they were like, this is a great idea. Let me see it on the internet because I don't like to do stuff on my phone. And I was like, oh, God, like there's going to be a whole market full of people who don't want to do it on the phone.
Yeah.
So So then we immediately had to go back and say, okay, now we need the website to match. And so, that was pivot number one. I think number two as a big pivot was probably just how we market. I've learned so far that when I talk to somebody about it, they're super excited. I just tell them like, hey, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and they're super excited. When I send someone an email that says, hey, this is what we do and how we do it, it's like it's going in spam folders, or they're not getting it, or they're looking at it and going, this is too good to be true, or I don't know exactly why they say no, but it's not the same as when I'm able to just like talk to them. So there's other ways to go about it, like bridal shows versus e-blasts, or like a call center call versus just trying to send somebody to the blog. It's a different way to approach it.
Well, in regards to that second pivot, in terms of marketing and how you would position your startup, I mean, could you discuss your approach to the market research before you actually started putting it out there, and how were you able to actually find a product market fit in the early stages before you even approached a single customer?
Well, so I'm lucky in that I was able to be, I am a wedding vendor, right? So I, work with wedding vendors all the time. Every time I DJ'd a wedding, I was meeting the caterer, I was meeting the florist, I was meeting the officiant, like all these people, and the photographers. I was always meeting photographers, and one of the things that made me think this is really the time to do it was I met a photographer who was she was like a single mom. She was doing this sort of as a side hustle, photography, and so she wasn't doing like a wedding every weekend. She was doing one a month. And so for her booth at this bridal show, it was going to cost her almost the same amount as it was to like do a wedding. And she was like, I can't just give up that kind of money. I need a way to do this, to market myself without spending all this money. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make it easier for vendors to get the word out. So
I mean, that must have been pretty high pressure in the early days, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like when I started, so not to give you like too long of a crazy story, but when I started, I moved to Los Angeles. So super quick background. I was working for a company that DJ'd weddings in Washington, D.C., which is where I'm from. And I decided that I would make more money if I could just do it myself. But I had a non-compete agreement in my contract with them. And I think it was for like 200 miles in like 2 years. So 200 miles north of DC is nothing, and 200 miles south of DC is nothing, right? So I was like, I'm going to move to LA and be a DJ. And then, I just found out when I got to LA that like every out of work actor is also a DJ / bartender / whatever, you know what I mean? And so totally not the right market. And so after that, I still had my day job, and I was kind of like, what can I do? And so I think in LA that year, I did like 4 events. I think only one of them was a wedding, and I think 3 were corporate. So then at that point, I found this website called the Wedding Report, and they just have the stats for all the weddings and like wedding vendors and pricing, and it just collected from the United States, and you can just pay for a membership, and you can like look up zip codes and see how much things get charged. And so I found out that San Francisco had a very similar model, similar like demographics to Washington, D.C., right? So San Francisco has about 800,000 people. I think DC has 700,000. East Bay has like a few million that commute across the bridge. Northern Virginia, same thing, a few million that come across the bridge. Southern Maryland, the same thing as North Bay and Marin and that kind of thing. And so, and like education levels are the same. And so when I was looking at how similar the markets were, I was like, oh, well, the same model that I was using in DC, or that company was using in DC, I could just adapt it to San Francisco. And so I transferred offices from LA to San Francisco, and then started the DJ company again in San Francisco, and it took right off. Like I think I did 22 events that first year, and then before, like up until the pandemic happened, I was doing like 40 events a year, which that's, for me, that was a lot because I'm the only person.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. I mean, you really, I guess the saying goes, you made lemons out of lemon hair, lemonade out of lemons. Yeah, well, so I mean, for the pressure and the stress that you were experiencing that time, I mean, I know for every entrepreneur who's out there, the ups and downs. I mean, it truly is an emotional roller coaster every single day. If you have the best day ever in sales, the very next day could be the lowest day if you've ever had in your business because you get some bad news somewhere. And I want to get from you, I guess, the from those stresses, how do you personally manage this, or how do you foster a healthy work environment in your day to day building a startup?
um, so again, I feel like this is one of those things that it's a platitude that people say, and I don't want your listeners to be, like jaded or to feel bad about it. But
Yeah,
honestly, I think it's patience. Like there are times where I wanted it to go really fast, and I was like, we got to make this happen. And when I just sit back and go, okay, if this doesn't happen for another month or another 2 months,
yeah,
nothing's gonna, it's not gonna be the end of the world. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So, so that's what kept me sort of grounded and kept me from like being super stressed and pulling my hair out, because I was kind of like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
this will happen. Like we've got everything we need to make it happen, except for this one thing. And if we have to wait a month for that, or if we have to wait 2 months for that, we can.
yeah. No, I mean that's a really great point. I mean, I can't tell you how many founders we've come across our table looking for an investment, essentially saying that they need to make money or start generating revenues within the first 3 months of building their business, when some of those goals or timelines may not be necessarily realistic, and
Right.
their intention essentially is that I have to cover rent next month, and that may be true, and that's also why we always recommend don't quit your day job if you can afford to do this as a on the side while you're building your business. And um, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of founders don't really understand about building a business is, just like you said, it takes a lot of time sometimes. Like there is no $1 million business in the first 6 months unless they already had a huge budget and the business like pre-built. But yeah. So I think, one of the final questions that I have for you before we go here is, as far as, since you talk a lot about patience and understanding and how your business should move rather than it having that high expectation and then being disappointed, for your measure of success, how do you define that? And what does that look like? Is that a success really measured by the business, or maybe your personal life?
I mean, that's a really good question. Up so as far as this process has been going, the way I've measured success is getting big pieces of it done. So like I was very happy when the app was built. Now that didn't mean that, right after the app, got built. I mean, we're not Threads. We didn't get 100 million users in 5 days. You know what I mean? So I was happy the app got built. And then, like I said, we sort of pivoted and wanted to do the website in addition. So I was very happy when that got built. And I'm happy whenever we get users. Like, I do get an email every time someone joins, and I'm able to either, like, there's an automatic generated email that says, "Hey, thanks for joining," blah, blah. But sometimes I can reach out to them directly and say, "Hey, like, I'm glad you joined. Like, I looked at your page and you've got a really great whatever." And so that's really nice. My goal is to start getting to the point where it's, 100 users or hundreds of users, you know, in like my goal is to get to 100 users a month. So
Mhm.
when we start to get to that level, I will be very happy. But right now, I'm not disappointed that we're not there yet. I'm just kind of like happy every time we get somebody in there. And
Yeah,
as
yeah,
those numbers build, then it's like, okay, good. We're moving in the right direction.
yeah, yeah. Well, that actually speaks to the importance of even having a goal. Like a lot of people, they don't even have. If you're looking at, when you have a GPS out, you don't just say "take me somewhere." You have to put in an actual address, and that's really what goals do. Is it helps us define the picture or the direction we need to go. And sure, maybe sometimes you don't hit the goal, but at least you have an idea and you're not walking in the dark. But yeah, I
Right.
appreciate you sharing that. Well, Trevor, I really, really thank you for sharing everything today. And before we go, I mean, I would like to ask you, is there anything that you would like to say to our listeners?
You know what? I hope that anybody on this journey does try to see it as I think this is a really fun process. I'd rather be doing this than, working for somebody else all the time. Don't get me wrong, we all need paychecks, but like this has been a fun journey for me. So I hope you guys are not super stressed out and that it's fun for you and that, you find it an enjoyable process. Like, I think that's actually kind of important.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Trevor, everyone. So Trevor, the founder and CEO of Wedstimate, thank you again for coming on today. We will see everyone next week.
All right. Thanks a lot.
See ya.